Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching and listening to the Props Clear podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Angeline. We're talking all about drones and about improving public perception surrounding the unmanned aviation industry. If you've been enjoying these episodes, be sure to click subscribe and follow, and also leave a comment if you can. Let me know what you think about the show. Now, these shows are for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, so none of this constitutes legal advice. Fasten your seatbelts and let's get started. Today's guest is Max Tubman. He's the Director of Integrations at Drone Amplified. All right, Max, thank you so much for talking with me about Drone Amplified. I was so excited to see the dragon eggs sitting there at the Girls in Aviation Day event earlier.
Yeah.
Wanted to see if we could chat. Glad we're having some time to talk about what dragon eggs are. Really interesting because a lot of people don't realize that this technology is out there and it makes the lives of firefighters, especially in the West, so much easier. Tell me about what this process is and why drones are being used for prescribed burns and other operations and to keep people safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy to be here. So these are the dragon eggs, or also as ignition spheres. This is a demo one, so you can see it's been punctured many times. But essentially, this has a chemical in it. Right before it's dropped out of the hopper, it's injected with glycol, which is essentially antifreeze. And then if everything goes right, the timing is about 30 seconds. So it drops, hits the ground, and then it gets really hot and then catches on fire. And a lot of people don't realize that, or it's kind of counterintuitive why you light fires to fight fires.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a practice that's been used for a long, long time. And these actually were developed for manned aviation or crewed aviation. They're used out of helicopters now. So these are already being used out of helicopters for a long time. And then we've been using them out of drones since about 2015.
That's absolutely incredible. Now, if you could just put that a little bit closer to the camera so
Yeah.
people can see those little holes there. And what that
Yeah.
is you were saying the hopper, and then there's something called the dropper. So the hopper
Yeah.
is where all of these dragon spheres sit, which is basically at the in the belly of the drone. And then what
Yeah.
happens is, and we can show some video that
Yeah.
you will send us. But basically, there's a pin, like a very sharp pin. So
There's
the
two. Yeah. So as it falls out of the hopper, and there's a little auger to get them to come out. And then there's a little thing that goes back and forth. So it takes one and then jams it against the pin. And then as it goes back, it drops out and then catches another one and then jams it on the pin on the other side. So it can drop them pretty fast. I don't remember the drop rate off the top of my head, but it's more than a few a second. That's all settable by the user. So, but
To
yeah.
simplify it, it kind of reminds me of the commercials that you see years ago with the lottery, and
Mhm.
you watch the balls come into
Yeah.
to their little chamber. So
Mhm.
basically, these dragon spheres are going into a chamber. They're getting injected with the ethylene glycol, and
Mhm.
then they're getting sent out. And with that,
Yep.
within that time frame, you were saying it's like antifreeze, but when the
Yeah. Yeah.
antifreeze gets introduced to the air, is that how
It's
they ignite?
there's a chemical in here called potassium permanganate, and when those two chemicals mix, then they get really hot. So we can adjust the amount of glycol. There's a bunch of variables, but depending on like the outdoor temperature is the big variable amongst others. The amount that you inject in here basically is how quickly the reaction happens. So we'll do some drops on the ground, or our customers will do drops on the ground, and then we want to kind of time it so that you don't want to catch on fire in the air because it's out by the time it hits the ground. So they'll kind of figure out the right mixture for the day, and then it will, inject that amount into the ignition sphere so that, it can fall from the drone. If it hits any trees, it kind of falls to the bottom of the trees, and then it hits the underbrush, and then that's what we want to do. We want to burn the fuel on the forest floor, essentially. And I can kind of speak to why controlled burns work on a high level if that's something interesting.
Sure, I'd love to hear
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess to take a step back, I used to work at Free Fly Systems, which is
Mhm.
an aircraft manufacturer, and Drone Amplified was one of our customers, or is a Free Fly Systems customer. And I was so impressed with the impact that the drones were having with these payloads that I just became really passionate about what Drone Amplify was doing. So I decided this is where I want to go work. And this is something that I thought I understood, but I really didn't understand it as deeply as I thought until I started working here, and then I started learning a lot more about it. But essentially, the forest floor will have a lot of fuel that will build up. So that can be branches or underbrush or leaves or all sorts of different things uh, on the forest floor, and that becomes fuel. And if you have a forest fire that kind of gets out of control, that fuel gets really hot, and then that catches the tops of the trees on fire, and then you have a crown fire, and that's when the fires are like way out of control. They spread, they hop over roads and rivers and things like that, and that's what we really don't want. So a prescribed burn, what you do is you kind of find a natural barrier like a road or river, and then you work with the right wind direction and you slowly start burning. So say you have a road here and the wind is blowing this way. You'll start burning the underbrush here, and then the road or the natural barrier, whatever it is, stops the fire. So it just burns a little bit, and then you go another line, you burn a little bit more, and that's what you can do to burn up the underbrush in a controlled manner so that it doesn't get too hot, and then you don't get a crown fire or just a wildfire. So that's how controlled burns work. Uh, there was a time in the U.S. where that was against the policy, so we're going to be making up for that policy decision for a long, long time. Um, so, but prior to that, this is something that was just kind of the natural flow of the ecosystem. These a lot of plants kind of require a wildfire to seed, so it's like it's a natural process, and now we kind of have to play a little bit catch up. Um, so there's two times where you do a prescribed burn. There's one when it's off season, when it's a little bit wet, and you kind of get ahead of it, and you do the burn that way. That's a prescribed burn, and then you can do a back burn, which is like if you have an active wildfire and you want to try to control where it's going. So if you think it's heading in this direction, and you can control to burn up some of the fuel to kind of help put it out that way, then that's another thing that's a little bit more dynamic. And there's a bunch of different ways they've done this. There is helicopters that drop the ignition spheres, and there's another one that drops kind of like almost like a liquid flame. It's
Mhm.
almost like a napalm. I don't know exactly what it is. And then there is people who go around with drip torches on the
Mhm.
ground. And back when I was at Free Fly and we were working on the Blue UAS program, I remember talking to firefighters out in Colorado, and they were saying before this IGNIS system, we'd have to hike up those mountains, and they were like pointing off to mountains in the
Mhm.
dark, in smoke, in bad weather, and if the wind changes directions, like the people with the drip torches are in a lot of danger. So
Yeah.
to be able to remove that person from a super dangerous situation, and then also, of course, flying helicopters in this situation is even more dangerous. Um, so to be able to augment those roles and to remove those people from the dangerous situations with UAS, it's just a really awesome job to be a part of, an awesome solution to be a part of. And it's not replacing people with drip torches, it's not
Mhm.
replacing helicopters, it's just kind of augmenting that. So,
And I think
eh,
that's important to mention because, my goal for this show is improving public perception. A lot of
mhm,
people say, well, you might be getting rid of people's jobs. But like you
yeah,
said, you're augmenting them. And in fact, you're saving lives in the process.
yeah.
Because if you're trying to create a backburn with these drones, first of all, like you said, you're getting to hard to reach places. That was even a
Mhm,
quote from the Department of Interior on your website is, this system is able to get to hard to reach places and prevents the often labor intensive process, which is
mhm,
huge. And it also
yeah,
allows, you know, you all to get the job done in in a much faster process because they're
yeah,
not lugging through the tough terrain to get
yeah,
something done. Drones can move over terrain much faster because they're in the air than people on foot that have been
mhm.
working for 12 hours.
Yeah, and it kind of expands the amount of resources that they have. So if they have one helicopter, that's great, but that might have to be shared amongst a lot of different areas. It's a lot more
Mhm.
expensive. Whereas if you have lots of different drone teams, it can cover those teams can cover a lot more areas. And in terms of taking people's jobs, they're trying to train as many people as they can to do this aerial ignition. So the Forest Service hosts an aerial ignition academy, and I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but they used to have maybe one or two, and now they're
Mhm.
doing like two a season or two in the beginning of the year and then two at the end of the year. So
Mhm.
they're doing four now. So um, yeah, they're definitely increasing the amount of people that are trained to do this, and I think there's more aerial ignition teams ahead of us than there are already established.
Now you're saying you were with Free Fly and you joined IGNIS. Tell me about the origins of the IGNIS system.
Yeah, so the founders of the company worked at the University of Lincoln, Nebraska. They were professors there at the Nimbus Lab.
Mhm.
The Nimbus Lab is, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a robotics autonomy lab, and they're working on all sorts of great projects. And this was one of the projects that they were working on. It got some legs, it got a lot of interest, and then they kind of started this company, Drone Amplified, back in 2015.
Mhm.
And then slowly, as it came out of that research project, Drone Amplified productized it, and that was over a couple of years. I think it was really in 2020 or 2019 when really started seeing some of the larger orders come through, the larger adoption.
Mhm.
And then last year, Free Fly Systems East, which was a division of Free Fly Systems, which is our East Coast office, basically amicably decoupled from Free Fly and then joined up with Drone Amplified. So that was a delicate dance, but it really worked out well for everyone because we still get to work with the Free Fly products and the Free Fly team, and they're a great partner, and we get to work on doing the integration systems and things like that. And I should say that we work with other drone companies too. We are drone agnostic. Free Fly is what we know the best, and that's certainly what we're using the most right now.
Mhm.
But we've worked with Inspired Flight and the Bobby Watts and his team.
Mhm.
We've evaluated a bunch of other aircraft, the Arc Sky. So there's a lot of great aircraft out there, and we are generally aircraft agnostic as well.
And that's one thing I hear so much from the drone community. Even just earlier this week, I was hearing from people saying that everyone works together. There's so much collaboration in the drone industry. And your company is an exact example of being able to work together for a common goal of bringing the drone message to so many different people. And like we said, helping to save lives in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the hashtag drones for good. There's a lot of great things that drones can do. There's some not so great things that drones can do. And it's very rewarding to be working on these projects that have, tangible impacts. There's a lot of other proposals in the drone industry of things that you could maybe do with a drone, but they're a little bit farther off in the future. And we don't know if and when we'll see the impact of those. But this is an example of something that is, saving people's lives, not only the people who are out fighting the fires, but also the people who are impacted by the fires. And unfortunately, it seems like fires are not going away anytime soon. Wildfires seem to be getting more prevalent. So there's a lot of room to grow in this industry for us and for other startups in the wildland firefighting arena as well.
Max, as a director of integrations, you're focused on the IGNIS system, but you can also take off the shelf drones and integrate other systems into them.
Mhm.
Tell me about that process and what that's like for you.
Yeah. So as a director of integrations, I work some on the Ignis, but also a lot more on the kind of the newer projects or like other kind of skunk work projects. So some of it is geospatial mapping projects. So someone will say, we have this hyperspectral or multispectral camera and we need it to fly on the drone. We need to have, a network radio that's NDA compliant. We need to be able to control the camera. And they kind of give us all their different specs. This is just one example. And we'll find a way to get all these different parts to talk together. It's people do not realize the challenge it takes to take a drone and then take a sensor that is sometimes used on the ground and then get them to all work in one network and have the controls on the ground and everything like that. So that's a big part of what we do. And sometimes those are smaller projects. It'll be a small fleet for a company, and sometimes it'll be a larger development project. So another example is the DART system, which is our
Mhm.
avalanche reduction system. This
Pretty
is something that,
incredible. You're going to have to describe
yeah,
that.
yeah. So this is something that was announced about a month ago. Essentially, it's a payload. It's really a whole system. So we developed software for this, a ground control app,
Mhm.
a dropper mechanism, and then the payload. And what it does is it's dropping a payload, an explosive payload, onto avalanches to trigger the avalanche, or it's dropping onto snow to trigger the avalanche. And
Mhm.
then that way you can kind of control the avalanches when they're going off and where they're going off. This is obviously something that's huge at ski resorts, but we're primarily focused on departments of transportation right now. And the reason why that's really important is if you can trigger the avalanche at the right time, you can prevent it from covering roads or covering railroad tracks, things like that. And then if you have an avalanche come and take out railroad tracks or a busy highway, it
Mhm.
can be a huge blocker for transportation of goods or people or all sorts of stuff.
So how does that prevent snow from ending up on roadways if you're
Yeah,
creating the avalanche and it's snow is coming down the hill and possibly onto the road?
yeah. Well, essentially, if the avalanche is allowed, or if enough snowpack is able to build up where it triggers itself naturally,
Mhm.
there could potentially be a lot more snow build up, and then that snow can just travel a lot farther. Whereas if you
Mhm.
trigger it before the snowpack gets too high, then it just kind of stops before there's just not enough snow. If you do it right, not enough snow to hit the road or the rail tracks, kind of just peters out before it gets down there.
All right, are you the first company to have that kind of technology? Because that's the first time I've heard of something like that.
I'm pretty sure in the United States we're the first ones to do it. There's been a lot of other companies who are experimenting, but as far as like dropping live rounds onto avalanches, I'm pretty sure we are. I don't want to I don't want to step on anyone's toes if someone else did it first. I know there's other companies doing it in Europe, and there's a handful of companies in North America that are exploring these options, different elements of it or the whole system. But as far as I know, we're the first to do it in the United States.
What kind of explosive are you using for something like this?
Um, I don't want to get too much into details on that. Actually, it's a little bit early in the
Okay.
process. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's I can say that the explosives that we're using are basically industry standard explosives. So stuff that the avalanche control industry is already very very familiar with, and it's stuff that they're using in other control methods already.
It seems like so much of Drone Amplified's work is trying to push the limits and push the boundaries of what drones can do.
Mhm.
What is that like for you every single day to go to work where you're constantly finding new ways to use drones to make a difference in the world?
Well, it's very rewarding, as I mentioned earlier. I have a amazing team in the East Coast office that I've worked with for a very long time, and we're able to kind of debate and argue and
Yeah.
still be buddies at the end of the day. So we're able to have like a lot of trust within each other to find the best solutions and kind of sometimes debate the best solutions. So it's a very rewarding and stimulating place to work. And then the people in the Nebraska office who I've worked with for about a year have added just like so much brain power and other perspectives and insights and great design ideas. So it's been the two teams have meshed really well together. And then in terms of like thinking about the projects that we're working on, a lot of them are come from our customers. Like we'll think like, hey, maybe this is a good idea,
Mhm.
or let's see what if this has legs or not. But really, it's our customers that say, here's an actual problem that we have that
Mhm.
needs a solution. I think there's a lot of companies who try to say like, oh, we have a solution. Let's go find a problem for this solution.
Yeah.
Where we're really like people are coming to us with problems to solve, and to it's it's very rewarding in the fact that it's like this stuff is actually getting used. We're working on designing it, and in a couple weeks or a month, we're going to be out testing it in the field, and it has to work in the field. So having that kind of quick design cycle while still maintaining quality and a strict testing regimen is very rewarding.
How did you get involved in drones?
Uh, that was a long time ago. So I graduated from film school in 2008, and I used to fly RC helicopters, like single rotor RC helicopters. And I immediately just like the GoPro one came out, and I put that on the RC helicopter, and I was already working on film sets, so it was just like got out of hand from there. But I had my own company doing film for a while, and then I worked for an Australian company called XM2
Mhm.
for a year or two, and then after that, I slowly started getting into like kind of the industrial and the manufacturing side through a series of other you know jobs that I took and started. So
One of the interviews I did for the show is with Alex Vanover. He's on all
oh
the
cool.
Hollywood sets using
Mhm.
FPV drones
Oh yeah,
to
yeah,
fly in at Michael Bay movies and other
yeah.
films.
Mhm.
And he uses the headset and flying.
Mhm.
It's the FPV world is such a different experience to fly a drone. I haven't flown an FPV drone myself, but when you watch the
Oh yeah.
videos, it's incredible to see what someone's capable of.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I do that for fun. I'm definitely. I would never do that on a film set. I got a lot of buddies who do. The last, I think, film set I was on was a Severance about a little over a year ago, and some of the guys I was working with there do like amazing FPV work. But yeah, I pretty much retired from film years ago. Every once in a while, there'll be a really cool job that my friends are doing that I try to sucker my way onto set. But for the most part, uh, I'm in the drone shop now, making the toys.
But maybe on some of the major movies about wildland fires,
Mhm.
I know there have been quite a number of them over the years. Maybe the next one will involve the IGNIS from Drone
Yeah,
Amplified. That would be
yeah, I
kind of
hope
cool.
so. They would be. So if you're a director of a major motion picture about wildland fires and you're watching this, like, give me a call. I'll send you equipment. I'll come fly it.
I mean, I've seen more and more drones get implemented into shows. You see it on The
Hmm.
Rookie, you see it
Yeah,
on other platforms where you see them mention drones, and
yeah.
it's like nothing. It's just part of the ecosystem, and that's a great way for education. People
Hmm.
are watching it, they see it, they learn more about drones, and it helps them just get a little bit more familiar with this technology that's still pretty new.
Yeah, one of my good buddies here and a business partner from long ago, uh, I we met on. I was doing a job where we had a small prop drones on a show called Alpha House, which was an Amazon show, I think in like 2013. And John Goodman is the main character, and he shoots them out of the sky, these drones with a shotgun. So I met this guy because I interviewed a ton of people because I needed someone to fly it manually. It had a big iPad on it, so it was kind of like a hard to fly. And he was the first one out of all the people I interviewed that was capable of flying. So, um, there's a lot of things about the film world: high pressure, high intensity. You can't fail. That transition or trained us for like some of this industrial stuff that we do now. The same thing, high pressure, can't fail, needs to work every single time. So I'm happy I don't do the film stuff anymore. This is a lot less stressful. So
Well, that's good to know. But tinkering
yeah,
is also kind of a process.
yeah,
There's a lot of pressure to be able to make sure that everything works. You want to make
mhm.
sure the Ignis system works. The
Oh yeah,
dragon
yeah,
eggs end up getting the right amount of ethylene glycol inside of them so that
yeah.
they can make a difference on the forest floor. What are some of your clients, or what kind of feedback have you gotten from those clients?
Well, for one, it's actually used in almost every single state in the U.S. So we have someone doing a training today in Florida, and Florida's got a bunch of these. The state of Florida, so the federal government has a lot of these with the USDA and the Department of Interior, but then state organizations have these as well. So they're used all over. There's also some folks in Canada and some folks in Australia, and hopefully some people in around Europe as well soon. Um, but the feedback that we get is great. We really want to focus on being great at customer support. We know that the people who are using these things are in a high pressure environment and they sometimes have a limited amount of time that they want to do the burn. So we focus on that whole customer experience and we strive to be, very responsive, have a high quality product, and then constantly taking feedback from customers, sending our engineers out on burns even to say, what's working well and what's not working well, and then constantly trying to iterate on these things. And then a big element of what we do here is testing. Like earlier today, everyone kind of takes some part of the testing, but we have a project coming up, and we had to go do I don't know 150 of these different test procedures, this week. So I put my time in today. I was doing about 50 of these drops for the Dart system as an example. But uh, I don't know if I answered your question or if I just kind of went off on tangent. But
No, it did, and
yeah,
I mean the testing is a huge part of this, and
mhm,
especially as director of integrations, you want to make sure that everything's integrated properly before you send it off into the real world.
mhm.
You have the testing facility in New Jersey, correct?
Yeah, New Jersey, and there's also testing that happens in Lincoln, Nebraska as well. But any of the new projects, the kind of skunk work stuff, is happening in New Jersey for the most part.
So you're testing these systems, figuring out what's working, what's not. How do you keep track? Do you keep notes? If you're saying you're doing 150
Oh yeah,
drops, every single drop, are you meticulously writing down what worked,
yeah.
what didn't, and then going back and trying to figure out how to fix something that may not have been the exact way you wanted to make it happen?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everything has to be documented. Otherwise, it's like there's no point. We also want to show customers at the end, like this is the testing that we did. So if they have to go get approvals and stuff, having that testing documentation helps a lot. Um, one thing is you want to kind of set the test parameters in the beginning,
Mhm.
and say this is what it takes to pass, and then this is what it takes to fail. If you
Mhm.
don't have that done, you could get 99% of the way and have a failure, and then you can kind of be like, well, maybe we should just let it pass. So you have to really set your parameters. Like if this happens, no matter what, if this happens, the test fails. You got to start all over. You got to fix a problem and then start all over. Um, so yeah, depending on what the test is, there's a lot of different ways, but we're big into Google spreadsheets and Google Docs that people can collaborate on. But everything has to be written down. We try to think of what are all the different ways that this could break that we can think of, and then what are the ways that like our customers are going to break this, by accident. If someone who's not like
Okay.
trained on it, who come trying to use it with minimal training, like what are the ways that they could use it incorrectly due to lack of training, and how can we make it easier for them to use and harder for them to break? So that's a lot of what the testing is all about.
Were you testing a lot on the Ignis as well as the Dart?
Yeah. Well, the Ignis, like that, is the stage of development that it is in is a little bit
Mhm.
more developed. So we'll test new software when we do software releases, but like the Dart, we're still testing new hardware, and there's a lot of new things. That's like much, much earlier. That's not like a product that we sell yet. It's very much a development process right now.
When the Ignis before that got officially like released out into the
Yeah.
world, were you there at that point in time and were you helping
No.
to test that? No.
I'm familiar with the tests that were done, but I've only been at Drone Amplified for a little over a year, and that was done, years ago. So they're on their second iteration. They launched at
Mhm.
Ignis One, and then they launched at Ignis Two, and the Ignis Two is what they launched really with the Alta X and some of these other Blue certified aircraft. But that was before my time here.
What is it like to be doing that testing? It sounds like it's constant repetition to
Yeah.
see what's working and what's not working. Is it sounds, I don't know. It sounds very like
Mhm.
you're doing the same thing constantly. It's kind of like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like
Well,
it's like, people who do ballet before
mhm.
they practice for a recital,
Yeah.
they're constantly doing the same thing over and over to correct
Mhm.
for any little thing. Is that, I'm the kind of person that likes every day to be a little bit different. Do you feel
Yeah.
like, what is that like for you?
Well, it has highs and lows because, say for example, we're going to replicate a test 150 times. Well, for before that, there was a lot of times where we had to develop the software, develop the mechanical hardware, whatever. So that can have its lows because
Mhm.
sometimes you get really far into a process and you have to start all over. You say, "Oh, we found another edge case that we weren't thinking of." Like, go back to the drawing board. So that can be a bummer sometimes, but it can be a rewarding challenge to like how can we get these puzzle pieces to fit together or
Mhm.
make the puzzle pieces then build the puzzle. And so it can be a huge challenge as well as a very rewarding process. Today we're at the stage now where the testing is going really well, so no surprises right now, but there's been plenty of times when you get really far into it and you have to kind of start over, so that can be frustrating, but it could also be exciting. you know I guess like sometimes some of us here are like punishment because you could fail a test and that can be
Mhm.
a real drag, but you could be like, wow, we also just learned something
Yeah.
that we never even thought of before. Like, so there's something nice about that if you want to find the silver lining. A lot of people, I could say, rather, some people might not be cut out for that type of work, like
Mhm.
where you see a failure as nothing more than a failure. But a lot of times we see a failure as like, we just learned something. Now we have this information for future projects going forward on
Mhm.
this project, and we've learned something new today, and that's cool. It doesn't always have that sunny outlook on it, but we try to be optimistic about learning from our failures, and if we're not failing, we're not really pushing ourselves hard enough either to what the limit is.
I've heard a similar mentality though, especially in the
Mhm.
testing world when you're testing
Yeah.
equipment like this.
Yeah,
You
big
know,
clarification is we're failing the testing, not once once we send it out to
Of
the
course.
customer.
No, but I mean, you wanna find all the idiosyncrasies now, so
Mhm.
that when you
Yeah.
sell a product, it's gonna be top of the line, perfect
Mhm.
and beautiful and wonderful to get the job
Yeah.
done. I do have to ask though, you know,
Mhm.
there's not any snow in New Jersey right now, and I don't know if there's any
Yeah.
sitting in Lincoln, Nebraska. Do you
Yeah.
have like, I don't know, fake snow or something to be able to practice on to see
Yeah.
how something is working with something like an avalanche? Is that a
Yeah, it's a
stupid
great
question?
question. No, it's a great question. And even if sometimes there's a lot of snow in New Jersey
Mhm.
and in Lincoln, but it's flat. There's like no avalanches no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So we are traveling kind of constantly to different parts of the country to go like test on avalanches. But most of what we're doing is not, hey, will this thing trigger an avalanche? We know the explosives trigger avalanches.
Mhm.
That's something that people are doing now. They're doing it. Ski patrol is going up on the mountain. They're shooting howitzer cannons. They're dropping out of helicopters. They have all sorts of
Yeah.
different systems. So we're not trying to like see, can we trigger an avalanche with an explosion? Our testing is, will this drone drop when we want to drop and never drop when we don't want to drop? And
Mm.
what if the drone loses GPS? What if the drone is getting pelted with hail? What if there's a software bug or the app freezes or like a million other things? How will this fail safe?
Mhm.
It like I'm a
It's a
pilot as
giant science
well.
experiment.
Yeah, totally. I'm a general aviation pilot as well. And most of pilot training is like what happens when something doesn't work. Like almost,
Mhm.
depending on what stage of training you're in, that's most of what the training is. So same with this is we can get a servo to drop something relatively easy. That's simple,
Mhm.
but there's a million ways where, you know, if the drone is going to lose, like say the controller blows up or
Mhm.
disappears or whatever, and the drone has to come back, how is it going to RTL safely? If it has an explosive on it, we want to make sure that explosive is no longer armed. We want to make sure it's not going anywhere where it shouldn't be. It has to follow a specific route. There has to be rally points of like where things can happen safely. So there's just a million ways to do it incorrectly, and there's like a few to do it correctly. So we're really just like whittling this down to make sure the whole system, from the processes to the equipment to the software to the training, that all that system puts the end user on a path to success and not veer them off into something that could be very dangerous. So,
And this is where teamwork is so important because you
mhm.
need to be able to bounce ideas off of your team members. This is not a solo
Yeah,
experience
yeah,
because you need to be able to think up all those ways that things could go wrong or things could go right. And it's
yeah,
because it's, yeah, I mean, you don't have like a manual with this you're practically
yeah,
creating the manual, right?
yeah. And a big part of the teamwork is having trust. Like I have friends that work in other industries, and there might be a decision that's been made at their company that they're just like, oh, I don't really like this decision, but whatever,
Mhm.
I'm just at my job. At a company like or the projects that we're working on, everyone here has to be able to voice any concerns that they have, and not have like some tyrannical dictator, leader, or boss who just shoots down any ideas that they don't like. We need to be able to hear those ideas, debate with each other the safest way to do things, and that way everyone can kind of get behind the decisions that we're making, and we're able to think of as many edge cases as we can to try and engineer around or to prevent dangerous situations from happening. Particularly with the dart, like it's the same with the Ignis. Like
Yeah.
doing controlled burns is potentially very dangerous. You could start
Yep.
a wildfire, and that has happened, not with drones, but prescribed burns have gotten out of control. So doing it incorrectly would set the whole industry back a very,
Mhm.
very long time. So it's super important to us that anyone who's using the equipment knows what they're doing, has had training, but also everything that we're designing is as easy to use and as safe to use
Mhm.
as possible. And that weighs heavy on everyone here. Like no shortcuts are allowed, basically.
I love to hear that. When do you think the dart will be ready after
Uh,
all this testing?
yeah. Well, we're going to be doing testing. There's still parts of the country where we're still in avalanche season now. It's March 2024,
Mhm.
and we'll be doing a new iteration of testing next winter. So I'm not
Mhm.
sure if it's going to be like a product that will be for sale to certain customers. Obviously, this isn't something that anyone could buy, but I'm not sure if that'll be next winter or the following. I think it'll be kind of a staged approach. But ultimately it comes down to like when it's ready and when we're safe and when we're not going to be like racked with anxiety at night thinking about people using these without us. So,
Oh.
so yeah, we'll definitely be continuing doing testing in different iterations. We have some different partners who are avalanche experts who are working with, and they'll be doing testing with and without us this year, and then into next season too. So it'll be done when it's done, but hopefully. sometime next year.
I've been talking to different people about the importance of evangelizing about
Hmm.
drones. How important is that for you to be able to, get the word out about the dragon eggs, about what you're
Hmm.
doing, so that when people see drones flying in the sky, they know that they're there for a purpose, for a reason, and to help others.
Yeah. Well, there's like a bunch of different reasons why it's important. One is I just love to, the people I work with here also love to give back to community. We want to, I got little kids myself. I like to kind of teach the next generation because I think it's cool. And when I was younger, like I would fly RC airplanes and helicopters. But even when I started doing the
Hmm.
commercial work, there wasn't a whole lot of sharing of information. There was like helicopter forums and stuff like that, but nothing like today. But
Hmm.
to be able to get kids excited about this now, like I like to just share what I'm excited about. And then also selfishly, it's hard to find people who are good at doing this type of work. So
Hmm.
when we are like a lot of the core members of our office here have a background in RC, stuff, whether it's race quads or helicopters or planes or boats or whatever.
Hmm.
And anyone coming into this job with even a little bit of background with remote control vehicles or drones has a huge leg up because they have a basic understanding of the different components
And
involved and
it's
how
the
they talk
thumb
to each
muscle
other.
memory. It's the thumb
Yeah,
muscle memory.
yeah. Even if they're not flying as part of their job here, like they know how this stuff like basically works, and they have like some of the base knowledge. So whenever we're trying to hire like new folks or interns or whatever, I'll I'll sift through resumes and I'll look for keywords of like PX4 or RD Pilot or race drones or RC. So I want to get more kids involved, and like I think there'll be a huge wave that in like 10 or maybe sooner, but 10 years there'll just be a ton of people getting into the job market out of high school, like a technical high school or out of college, that have experience with this, even if it's a hobby, that would make them like great candidates to work here at other drone companies.
That's so exciting. What do your kids think about your work?
Well, they're pretty young, so they think it's cool, but they they're at an age where everything I do to them is cool. Like when they get a little bit older, they'll probably stop thinking I'm cool. But I fly RC airplanes. I fly little tiny whoops around the house.
Mhm.
Um, so they're excited about this stuff, but I don't think they really comprehend what I do on day to day. Although sometimes they're here drawing on my whiteboard behind me, hanging out. So there's many times where they're take your kid to work day.
Well, sometimes it's all about starting them young too. When you
Yeah,
say like, "Oh,
yeah,
I fly the little planes around the house,"
yeah.
like that's the kind of thing that an adult will say, "I remember my dad doing that,"
Mhm.
and that somehow inspired them in one way or another for
Yeah.
their future.
Yeah, yeah. We're constantly trying to build stuff, and I'd love it if they got into drones, but who knows? But yeah, I think that when I was a kid, I used to fly RC airplanes with my dad. My grandfather got me like when I was really young a control line, which is a control line plane is basically a plane on a string that you fill with gas and just goes
Uh-huh.
around really quick until you run out of gas. And that's something I started with my grandfather. I don't know, 30 something years ago. So yeah, that has steered me to where I am today. So working at the Girls in Aviation event is a great way to kind of help perpetuate that. Having young people grow up to get into an industry like this. Like when I was going to school, like
Mhm.
this wasn't really an industry. Although the first person to do filming from a drone was like in the late 80s, but there wasn't many people doing it back then. So, but now, you know, the more people know that this is a career path, whether it's like through
Mhm.
higher education like college or just through a technical school, um, I want to get that message out there as much as I can.
If you have topics or suggestions for future episodes, email me, angelswings.jillian@gmail.com. That's ANGELSWINGS.JILLIAN@gmail.com. I'll see you later.